Sean, we don't often do this for our interviews, but this is quite the elaborate set because you've got a big personality, so we had to show it here.
Yeah, well, it's fitting, looks good. Appreciate you guys going above and beyond for me.
As long as we get the sugar seal approval, then we're all set. All right, so as I was preparing for this interview, I realized that I don't know too much about you growing up. I know that you're the middle of 3 boys, but what was your experience in childhood like? Were you an athlete? Were you playing tons of sports? Were you totally away from organized sports, or what was your life like?
As young as I can remember, I feel like I was always playing sports. I think baseball was like the youngest. Baseball and soccer were like when I was 3, 4, 5, just anything my parents could kind of get us some energy out. So I feel like I've been playing sports since, that's like the oldest memories I have is playing sports. In team sports, basketball, football, baseball, soccer, those 4, we were always rotating. Sometimes soccer and baseball were the same season, overlapping each other, so I'd go from a soccer game to a baseball game. But all year round, we were playing sports.
As you got older, did you have a favorite?
I think my favorite was football, but I was so small, and I always felt like the coaches didn't. I'm like, put me in, I can make plays. Maybe I don't know. I feel like I wasn't getting the attention I wanted in football, basketball, and these certain sports. That's what kind of drove me away from team sports. I feel like they had favorites, and if you weren't the favorite, you weren't going to play as much, and it drove me crazy. I would want to play the entire basketball game. I would hate getting taken out in a game. I would pout. I had a pretty bad attitude. I was never really, you're not taught really at those ages to kind of, you're taught how to play the game, but you're not taught how to deal with the mental, things like getting taken out. Like, hey, you're all right. It's like we gotta all get in. I was very competitive, but as I got into high school, I didn't like school at all. I hated school. I did not want to go to school. You had to go to school. You had to get good grades to play these sports. So I got turned away from that kind of those sports, and I was like, well, I want to play one-on-one sport. I want to try boxing. I want to try kickboxing, and that's kind of how I got introduced to combat sports. But it was so random. It was just that was the sport that I knew was one-on-one, and it was in high school. So I was like, definitely we'll get chicks from this. That was one of like the main things was, I wanted to impress the chicks. I think fighting, that'll do it. So I started fighting and started kickboxing, kind of just go to the gym and, you'd spar. I wasn't really taught how to throw a 1-2. I wasn't really taught how to, do these things that hit mitts, kind of like 1-2, slip 2, and I just kind of do these things naturally. And I remember my coaches were like, oh, wow, like you have some, I had good pop on the mitts. Let's book you a fight, kickboxing fight, 16, knock someone out, get a couple kickboxing fights, knock some more people out. And I was like, okay, this is fun. I kind of start to build that confidence that I was looking for. Very insecure in high school, as we all are. You want to look good. You want to impress the chicks in high school. Like girls will never understand how hard it is for a young man in high school. You just want to impress them so bad. So very insecure in high school, and that's kind of what led me to fighting.
Did it impress the chicks?
I think so. No, I feel like looking back on it, I remember that vividly. Like that's kind of why I got into it. But looking back on it, I don't know if it really. I think just my confidence that I gained from it was I was able to talk to chicks easier. I don't know if it was necessarily like, hey, watch this fight that got me the chicks. I think it was just the confidence that came with it.
Sure. But that wasn't always your take on martial arts, specifically the UFC. I mean, your dad kind of infamously spoke about you saying, how can you guys watch this when he and your brothers were watching?
I have a vivid memory of like watching, I feel like I want to say it was a WBC fight when like Uriah and Dominic might have been. I don't remember who was fighting. I remember it was Uriah and somebody. And they were like getting punched in the chin and kicked in the ribs. And I was like, I don't understand how they can even. And they were just standing there, boom, hit it, and then they were fine. And it was just gross to me. I was like, that doesn't make sense at all. And I was honestly like disgusted by it. I was like, I can't watch that. I don't like to see that.
So when you did it yourself, did it change? Did your mindset say like, oh, I get it now?
A little bit. I remember that was like when I was, it's hard to say how old I was. I was pretty young, 10, 11, 12, maybe around that age when I saw that. I don't know if someone's going to do the math and be like, WC was around or something like that. It could have been, I don't know. I feel like I was pretty young, and it was years later where I started kickboxing. So, I think it might have been pre-puberty when I saw it, and then, hit puberty. I'm like, okay, I could probably take those guys.
WC was the best.
I didn't even really start watching UFC, like actually start watching until like it was like Connor started. Like that's kind of when it wasn't because of Connor, but that's kind of when I started like following the sport. So I got into kickboxing and MMA and wanting to be in the UFC before I even cared about watching it.
Do you remember realizing that you were good enough to maybe make a future out of fighting?
I remember, so I had my first MMA fight when I was 18. I was like, all right, if I win this fight, I'll keep doing it. If not, I'm gonna have to just, keep working and just try something else. Won that first fight, and God, it seems so blurry trying to pick like when I kind of started thinking about certain things. But 18 started, I had my first MMA fight, and it was addicted. I had already had 4 kickboxing fights. I already had boxing fights, but MMA was addicting. I knew I knew 0 wrestling and very little jujitsu. I had knocked the dude out in the second round, and it was addicting. I was like, okay, as much as I hate those sports, I have to learn how to do that if I want to fight MMA, because I just thought MMA was a lot more fun than kickboxing for whatever reason. Even though I didn't like the wrestling and jiu-jitsu, MMA was still cooler. It was realistic to become, in my mind, rich and famous. I don't think boxing, I didn't watch boxing at all, so I didn't think that was a route. It was like, wow, I guess, like I knew what the UFC was, so I was like, maybe I could do that.
So how did contenders come into play here? Because for the rest of us, it seemed like history was made when you stepped into that octagon for Dana White's Contender Series. But what's the lead up to that moment like for you?
Yeah, so being from Montana, we fought. I had a lot of amateur fights. I had like 14 amateur fights, which is a lot of fights. A lot of experience is really what I got out of that. The guys I was fighting sucked. Like everyone I fought as an amateur, for the most part, was not good. But I was gaining this confidence because I was winning. I was knocking people out, so I was gaining a lot of confidence, a lot of experience from those fights. So I fought, and they were all in Montana. All my amateur fights were in Montana except for 2. One was in like Seattle. Knocked this dude out. Thought I killed him. Hit him
my
with
God.
It was crazy. I hit him with a question mark kick, stiffened him up, and he was out for like 10 minutes. It was scary, but it was cool. After I knew he was fine. And then I had 1 amateur fight in Arizona. Other than that, all my fights were back in Montana. I turned pro, and I think my first 5 fights were in Montana. So 5 or 6 fights in Montana, and then I think I had 1 in North Dakota, and then I fought here, LFA. I don't remember which LFA. LFA right before the Contender Series. I knew Dana and Sean were supposed to be at that card. I remember hearing that. And then I remember hearing, fight week, fight day, whatever it was, that they're not going to be there. I'm like, well, they'll see this. They'll see this performance if I can go out there and do what I know I'm capable of doing. I'm fighting a guy named David Snoozo. David Nuzzo is what his name really is, but I was calling him David Snoozo because he was going to take a nap, and he sure did. I hit him with a beautiful right head kick into a spinning heel kick right to the chin after I'd already dropped him about, I think, 2 times, all in the first round. And I knew that was going to go viral. I knew the Contender Series was being talked about. It was this thing that was coming up. I was like, if I can go out there and do what I know I'm capable of doing, putting this dude's lights out, I will get on the Contender Series. And that's my way into the UFC. I was also only 21 at this time, 21, 22. So in my mind, I was like, I'm still super young. I'm still pretty early on in the wrestling, jiu-jitsu. Like I'm living that. I'm trying to get better fast. But I was still young in my career. So I wasn't worried. I wasn't even stressed about like, okay, if I get on the Contender Series, which I was pretty sure I was going to. I was 7-0, I think. I was like, I'll probably get on the Contender Series, win or lose. It's okay. I had a good mindset going into that fight. I was like, win or lose, I'm going to continue to get better, and I will be in the UFC by the time I'm 24, 25. I remember doing an interview saying that. Had a horrible camp for the Contender Series. I had a bad concussion. I was eating a vegan diet. I was like 139 pounds walking into the octagon.
Whoa.
I had already weighed in, I couldn't eat. This concussion was not good, had headaches, and it was bad. But, for whatever reason, I was confident. I was like, I can knock this guy out. I've been doing it, since I was 16, I've been knocking people out. I'm on a run right now, coming off a crazy knockout. I know what I'm capable of. And I'm going to go in there and get the job done. Snoop Dogg's commentating, Dana White, Sean Shelby, they're going to be sitting right there. I have to go out there and perform. And that's where I feel like my biggest asset is my ability to perform under the lights and get the job done no matter what. And like I said, I did not feel good. I shouldn't have been fighting that night. And you know, I battled some early adversity. Alfred, who was very good at the time, 8-3 with 8 finishes, and I went in there. He put me on my back, got up, and you know, put his lights out.
I want to ask about 2 different things you kind of hit on, because you had talked about as a kid, you maybe had like a bad attitude when it came to team sports, but how did you go in there saying like, all right, if I don't win, it's okay? Because that is a pretty big and pretty mature transition to make in terms of your mindset.
Yeah, that's a good question. I do remember like, so I moved in with Tim. Tim and I got an apartment in Phoenix, and we kind of started together learning how to, you know, trying to eat healthier, kind of reading mindset books. And I hated reading, hated school. But for me to be, I was like, oh, I can read a book about mindset and athletes. Like, I thought that was really cool, about performance. I'm like, okay, that's something I'm actually into. I will actually go to a coffee shop, sit down for half an hour and read. So I started reading. I don't know around what time, but I do believe it was around that time that I started reading a little bit and listening and learning about, you know, mindset. And I think that was a powerful tool for me.
Is that what led then to you having this confidence? Because you were saying, you know, in the lead up to Contender, after the win at Contender, that you could make waves in the UFC, that you could be the champion. And while many fighters believe that, and you almost have to going into a fight having that mindset, you were speaking about it on a different level. I mean, is that those books and all that work you put in, is that also where the confidence came from?
Yeah, I think so. I think the true confidence comes from experience, and the experiences I had fighting was knocking people out. So that's where I got the true confidence from. I was always confident, especially after going out there and knocking out so many people. As a pro, as an amateur, I was like, that's where the confidence came from. You know, like I said, I think Conor was kind of coming up right, and then I fought in Contenders 2017, so Conor was already kind of talking, and I take a lot from Conor. I learned a ton from Conor. So I think listening to Conor talk and be like, and seeing his self-belief made me confident in speaking my belief, instead of, you know, that wasn't forced. When I was on the Contender series saying, I have that thing, I have what it takes, I will be UFC champion, I will be a superstar. You hear people say that, and that kind of sounds forced. When I said that when I was 20 whatever years old, 21, 22 years old, it was true, a confidence. I meant it, and look where we're at now. So yeah, I think it was from my experiences. Also, I do believe it was from watching Conor. People are like, you want to be Conor? I'm like, well, I want to be as rich as Conor. You know, I would love to do what Conor's done in the sport. So if that's what it means, then sure, I want to be like Conor. I also don't want to be like him in many other ways. So I want to be the Sugar Show and do my own thing and pave my own path and inspire people to, you know, want to do sweet.
Have you guys interacted at all?
Not really. I did meet him once at a Cowboys football game. I posted a video.
Oh yes, I remember seeing this on social media.
Yeah, I posted it on mute. People went crazy. Like, even if I didn't have it on mute, you couldn't have heard. But I knew that it would, you know, go a little crazy if I posted on mute. I don't. He kind of. You see, he said some stuff. He also was trying to, you know, he was trying to get me to sign with whatever company, you know, their agency is and stuff. And you know, I wasn't there for that. But other than that, no, not really. I haven't. I've never really had much conversation. I've never had any other conversation than that with Conor. I've never talked to him on social media. Yeah.
It'd be interesting to see you two train together, but I want to get back to your story. So you win on Contender Series, you get into the UFC, and while we are exactly where you wanted to be, where you predicted that you would be fighting for a world title, it wasn't necessarily like a straight and perfectly smooth road. I want to talk about the Andre Sukumtot fight. I mean, you had this epic post-fight interview. Is that a moment that stands out to you? Because it certainly is for a lot of us.
It's so funny you bring that up. I literally hadn't watched that fight in, I would say, probably years. And I watched that fight yesterday. I watched the Terrion Ware fight, the debut fight, yesterday as well. I watched those two back to back. So I watched Terrion UFC debut, and then I watched Andre Soccer Mom. And it's funny because a lot of people are like, why do you think the fans like you so much? Why are they engaged with you? Why do they care about your career? And I would always be like, I don't know. I think blah, blah, blah. It's those performances. I mean, obviously the Alfred Kashakian one in the Contender Series. You see this skinny kid, like, you know, with knocking someone out. That's awesome, having a crazy fight, battling back. And then you go watch my Terrion Ware fight, which I didn't get 50 Gs from. It was one of my rare fights that I didn't get a bonus from, and I'm still upset about it. They gave it to the main event. Don't remember who it was, but it was not nearly as cool. Me and Terrion deserved to get 50,000 each. He had a great, great role in that by not getting knocked out. But that fight with Terrion was so entertaining. It was a young Suga just flowing at its finest, and it was a beautiful, beautiful performance, and it's one of my favorite fights to go back and watch. Fast forward to the Soccer Mom fight. So that was in December. Then I fight Andre in March. And battle with some serious adversity. The first round, I drop him. Second round, he takes me down, ends up in a triangle, go to an arm bar, get him in a guillotine, kind of sweep, end the round on his back. In that third round, I throw a head kick. And when I throw the head kick, I remember they saying that's kind of where they thought my foot broke, and it wasn't. It was when I landed and I went to throw a right hand, and I had a Liz Frank surgery, which is a pretty major surgery. So, yeah, about 2 or 3 minutes left in the fight, my foot snaps or whatever happens with a Liz Frank. I think the tendon snaps, something like that. Horrible, horrible. I remember it was excruciating pain. And he took me down. Wasn't very smart. But I also tell people I would have knocked him out on one foot too. I was piecing him up. So him taking me down, people are saying it looks stupid, but it would have looked a lot more stupid if I knocked him out on one foot. But he took me down. My dumbass actually is the one that got back up. And then he took me down again. That's where you could call him stupid. Go ahead. But yeah, that fight, I battled through adversity, got the job done, and I think that is where I did grow a very loyal fan base. Like, this dude is fun to watch.
What made you go back and watch that yesterday?
I had a workout where I was sitting on the assault bike for quite a long time. At a certain heart rate, and I think it was like 45 minutes. I was sitting there, so I watched back-to-back fights there. So that's why I watched it.
Oh, okay. So after that fight, you have the Cheeto fight, and I'm curious how.
Jose Quinones.
Well, I mean, just
Okay,
later
okay.
down the road, but I'm curious how you reflect upon that time and that fight now, especially where you are in the sport and the division.
Yeah, I got a lot of hate for saying that. I will never accept that as a loss, and I still won't. I know I didn't lose because he was better than me. It was a freak accident. He hasn't kicked anyone else's perennial nerve, so you can't tell me it was on purpose. I mean, yeah, I threw a leg kick, but to hit that specific exact spot to where your foot goes numb, I call it a freak accident. So to me, I haven't been beaten in the octagon, and that's just how it feels. That's how I'm experiencing life. Is I've never been in the octagon and actually lost. And I think Cheeto knows deep down that he got very, very lucky that night. But I love how my entire career's played out. Maybe me beating Cheeto co-main event pushed me to the top a little bit too fast. That setback set me up for Thomas Almeida, which was a beautiful return. One of my favorite fights to go back and watch. Dropped him in the first round, finished him in the third round. Went absolutely nuts, and then slowly kind of built from there. Thomas to Chris Moutinho, late minute replacement. So that fight, not getting a beautiful finish, which would have skyrocketed me to the top, maybe too fast. So I look at that as, my life is being guided from something higher, and it's meant for me to be in, the way it's played out was meant to play out that way.
I'm curious because you've also been a guy who is okay with saying no, it seems like. A lot of times fighters are pushed, especially when they have a star like yours, an ability like yours, they're pushed pretty quickly, or they're given crazy matchups, or they're given big spots on cards. And it seemed like you were okay being in the driver's seat, telling Dana or whoever it may be, like, no, and you held firm to your beliefs. I'm just curious because we don't see that a lot. What led you to always lead those decision-making processes?
Being able to manage my own career. A lot of these guys have MMA managers that have too many guys on the roster with too many different, plans, too many different ways that, this might affect this fighter, this might, if I take this fight, what does it do for the other guy in the same exact weight class? MMA management, and I will get into that very deep into another interview, is not where it should be. And so I think managing my own career, having a direct relationship with the UFC, having a very good relationship with the UFC has, helped my career play out the way it has.
Do you think that you could ever foresee yourself in the future doing something about MMA management, maybe starting your own firm or getting involved in any way?
I think that takes a lot of energy. but I almost feel like a calling to it because there's a lot of athletes that are getting screwed very, very bad, paying these guys 20% of their money. And for me to hear that, it's very sad. These fighters are going in there, and these managers aren't really doing much. They're relaying messages. They're a middleman. So, UFC gets a deal. They want to bring it direct to the athlete. That's how it should be done. But also, a lot of these athletes might not want to. They're like, I just want to fight. And it's like, if you just want to fight and you don't mind paying someone 15%, 20%, I mean, you're dumb. That's your own thing. But a lot of these guys, they feel like they don't have a choice. Like, that's how I have to get into the UFC. This guy has a relationship with Dana. This guy has a relationship with Sean. I have to use this guy to get into the UFC. And these managers are signing these fighters on horrible contracts, very, very disgusting contracts that are locking these guys in, and it's sad. So in that sense, I do feel like I might have to step in and play a role if I'm able to, because if I can help fighters, I would love to, but right now, my goal is obviously to become world champion.
And right now, you're leading by example anyway. So people can listen to interviews and see what you're doing and maybe emulate that. But I want to talk about the last time I saw you in the octagon. That was in Abu Dhabi when you fought against Petr Yan. In the lead up to that one, he was the former champ. He had a lot of support in Abu Dhabi. Did your mindset change at all? Was anything different for you as you headed into what ultimately turned out to be probably the biggest fight of your UFC career thus far?
So what was the question exactly?
Was your mindset any different? Did it feel different for you?
Going into the fight?
Yeah.
No, I felt very confident in that fight. I know how good Petr Yan is, but at the end of the day, he's a really good boxer. He had very sneaky kicks. He had a fast, beautiful body kick that he landed quite a bit. And I learned a lot from that fight, specifically because I did not plan on him wrestling. I should have. I grapple year round. We're grappling all the time, but my sparring partners were specifically more kickboxing oriented, without as many takedowns. Obviously, this fight with Aljo, vice versa, ton of wrestling. But in that fight, I was not planning on him wrestling, so my timing to the takedowns weren't like they will be against Aljo. With Aljo, my timing, you go back and watch that, Aljo goes back and watch that, his team goes back and watch that, and they may think, okay, we're gonna take it down easy. That's where I messed up. My timing to the takedowns weren't as good as they should have been because I was kickboxing, sparring too much. So I did learn a ton in that fight that I have to prepare. I should have known I'm gonna turn this dude into a wrestler. I don't think his game plan was to come out there and wrestle. I think his game plan was to come out there and he thought he was gonna be able to piece me up. It was vice versa. I look at his face at the end of the fight. Look at mine. I had a beautiful cut on him. Still got the scar on my knee from Peter's face. I'll treasure that one forever. But so I learned a lot from that fight. But as far as my mindset going into that fight, very confident in my abilities, very confident in that fight. I thought I was gonna be able to put his lights out in the second round. I did drop him. I don't think anyone else has dropped him in the UFC. I rocked him, boom, dropped him to a knee. And then him just being as good as he is and as tough as he is, rocked me back. He grabbed me, took me down. But that fight is very exciting. I do love watching that fight back. Very, very close fight. First round was the controversial one. Second one, you can give it to Peter. Third round, you can give it to me. First round was very up in the air. And I don't, people are like, well, I thought he lost. I thought you lost. I thought you won. I'm like, I don't care at all what anyone thinks about that fight. The judges gave me the fight. That's that. On to the next.
Did you know after that win that you would wait for an opportunity for the title, or were there other plans?
It was like, hey, do you care if we have Henry step in there? I was like, no, not at all. I'm gonna go, Aljo. I know how good Aljo is. He's very, very good. There's a reason he's been the champ as long as he's been. You're gonna give me extra months to go out there and keep wrestling, keep learning how to, the fundamentals, and learn how to wrestle defensively, keep learning jiu-jitsu. I'll take that extra time. I know how good he is. So yeah, I was completely fine with that. Let Henry take over. If Henry were to win, sweet, I'll fight Henry. If Aljo were to win, let's do it. I'm ready.
I spoke to you after the Aljo and Henry fight, and you told me you thought that Henry had won it.
Yeah.
Have you watched that back often? And I mean, what do you take away from it now?
I rewatched it. Tim and I rewatched it live. Tim and I both thought Henry won. Rewatching it, I do see how Aljo won. It was a close fight. I do think Aljo won the fight after rewatching. Aljo did what he needed to do to win that fight. Very impressed by Henry, though, being 36, coming off a couple-year layoff. You know, it was impressive. Henry did a good job. But it just goes to show you how good. Aljo is in his prime right now. I think he's 32, 33 years old. Every UFC champion that's a male is in their 30s. He's in his prime right now. Just beat a double champ. Before that, beat TJ Dillashaw, who is considered one of the best bantamweights of all time. Aljamain Sterling's in his prime right now. And for me, the Sugar Show, to go out there and take him out August 19th, where does that put me? The greatest bantamweight of all time.
That seems to excite you a little bit because when you're talking about it, you have a lot to say. I mean, for you, is this the greatest challenge you could have to become champion?
Absolutely. I think Aljamain is the toughest fight in the division right now, which makes sense. That's where the champion is supposed to be. I do think Aljamain, you know, is the best guy in the division, and he's proved that time and time again. And so, yeah, 100%, this is the toughest fight to win the belt. But that gives me some extra fire, extra juice, you know, going into each training session.
We talk about him a lot in terms of his grappling, but you had mentioned that his stand-up is weird and it's kind of funky, and that's what can throw people off. I mean, how do you prepare for a guy like that on the feet?
Yeah, it's very funky, but it's effective. I don't think Aljamain sucks at striking.
Right.
If he sucked at striking, he would have been knocked out at least twice. Only got knocked out once. So yeah, I think you know, it's effective. It's odd. It's awkward. It's, you know, it's probably better for him to be like that than be super technical. I tend to piece those guys up. I think Peter was very technical, and I think I got the better of Peter in those exchanges. So that awkwardness, I would say, will benefit him until it doesn't, until he leaves too many openings. Because I do find people's chins. You go look at my career, every round, there's very few fights I didn't drop someone. Terry Onwera didn't drop him. Andre Soccermom dropped him in the first round. Eddie Wineland dropped him in the first round. Jose Canuno dropped him. Didn't drop Cheeto until the second round. Just jokes. Cheeto fight, whatever. Thomas Almeida dropped him in the first, dropped him in the third. Chris Moutinho dropped him in the first. I find people's chins. And Aljo's cutting a lot of weight. He always does. It's not this fight specifically like, oh, he's got to cut a lot of weight. He just does. That's what he does. He cuts a lot of weight. He's very strong. He's very physical, and he leans on that. I know people that cut a lot of weight, they lose that liquid in their brain. I do think that's why Chris Moutinho was so tough. He was a 25er coming up. I did drop him in the first, but that dude took so many punches. I would almost bet my life that Aljo could not take that punishment with the weight cuts that he does. So I do think that will play a role in this fight, him having to cut a lot of weight. And, you know, I will find his chin.
Does that ability to find his chin benefit you for the fact that it's also scheduled for 5 rounds?
Very interesting question. I also have never fought 5 rounds, so this is a very new thing for me too. Even training camp, it's, you know, I'm sparring a lot further out for this fight specifically for that reason. It's crazy, you know, you're usually in shape for 3 hard rounds, you know, a couple weeks out from the fight, and you peak that day. I'm in shape right now for a 3-round fight. So I have, you know, whatever, 4 more weeks left to kind of continue to improve in that cardio and be ready for 5 rounds. So it'll be interesting. I'm excited for the challenge of 5 rounds. I'm excited for the challenge that Aljo presents in being as good of a grappler as he is.
You know, besides the sparring, has there been any difference in your preparation for 5 rounds in a potential 25 minutes as opposed to 15?
Yeah, I mean the amount of sprints you do in a 3-round fight, you add more for a 5-round fight. The amount of mitts you hit, extra rounds. Just everything is a little bit extra. And I said I specifically have not fought 5 rounds because I wanted to be paid a certain amount to fight 5 rounds. So people are like, I mean, you're not a star. We've never headlined. I could headline a show, you know, I could have headlined a show a long time ago. I didn't care to. I didn't want to fight 5 rounds. That's a long time extra. That's almost a whole nother fight. I mean, it is only 2 rounds, but my math, that's damn near, you're fighting twice in one night. Again, I didn't do good in high school, so that makes sense. But yeah, so, you know, I'm getting paid. I'm actually going to sign a new contract probably after I forgot to sign it to my email after this. So I'm happy. I'm accepting 5-round fights now.
And this one for the title, but we mentioned his grappling. Everyone wants to talk about the wrestling matchup. But maybe they don't talk enough about how much work you've put in for the last 5 or so years into your jujitsu and your ground game. I mean, for you, is there any part of you that's looking forward to showing you what you can do on the canvas?
No, I want to keep the fight standing and knock him out like I want to with everybody. I think that's what people want to see. If I could go out there, he gets in deep on a couple shots, I get up, he takes me down, I get up, or I stuff his shot, and I get to show people that, and they, the people that are excited to see that, they get to see that. But ideally, I go out there, stuff his shots, take his chin off, in Boston, stand there, celebrate, and we have a good night. That's what I want.
What do you think about him saying this is too soon? He's had injuries and he would have preferred this to be pushed back later.
Yeah, I find it funny because like a couple days before he was acting like he's like, you don't run the show. I'm the champ. I get a say. I'm like, all right. Good. Well, I'm not acting like I run the show. They said August 19th, and I said okay. Like I'm not acting like I run the show, but we're fighting August 19th, and so. Dana wants a big fight in Boston. Who else are you going to bring, other than Connor, to Boston? And that's going to excite the people that are going to get him excited. I am 68.8% Irish, according to my 23andMe. So you got to bring Sean O'Malley to Boston. As far as him saying it's too soon, too many injuries, he said that against Henry. He looked good against Henry. He won. To me, I feel like it's a little bit of a mind game he's playing for himself. Like, no, he's saying that out loud for people to hear. So when I go out there and punch him in the chin and he falls over, he'll be like, yeah, my bicep was killing me that night. So I think it's a little bit of, it could be mind games. He could be trying to play with me like, oh, I'm going to say this so Sean doesn't take me as serious. Who really knows? I very rarely believe anything anyone says, except for the Bible. Just kidding. I very rarely believe anything that I see, that I read, and that I hear. So whether he's dealing with injuries or not, if his injuries were as bad as he says they were leading into the Henry fight, I believe they fought for 25 minutes, a very tough fight. Something would have hurt, something would have blew out. So I don't take that too much into consideration. I'm gonna go out there and train the way I need to train and do what I need to do.
You guys had a face-off in Newark that kind of went viral.
Yeah.
Looking back on it, I mean, what are your thoughts on what you saw from Aljamain and then the other antics that happened in the octagon that night?
You can't tell me Merab does not look like a coat guy. That you walk into a hotel or wherever and you can't close your eyes and see someone that looks exactly like Merab, 5'5", kind of jacked, weird nose, ugly, weird hairline, and say this is not a coat guy. So I thought when I was in the cage, I'm like, oh, sweet, UFC knew I was gonna take my shirt off. Here's my coat. And it was Merab, I had no idea. And then he puts my coat on, and I'm already fired up. In the octagon, every time I've ever been in there, I've gotten a fight. So you some switches. I don't want to get in a fight. I didn't want to fight Aljo there. I don't want, I want to build a fight, but you get into a certain mode, and then looking back, they didn't let my coach in there, Tim, so now it's me with his whole team in there, and Merab's saying some stuff, Aljo's saying some stuff. So it was a little chaotic. I do think what I took away from that was, Aljo's he's jacked, but he's not as big as I thought, which doesn't matter. What matters is how you feel, your strength when you get a hold of someone. But I've never been face to face with him, with his shirt off, with my shirt off, as in we were in a fight. So I would take that away. He wasn't as intimidating as in a fact, like as big as I thought he was, or how big he looks on camera. Yeah, that's pretty much what I took away from that.
You mentioned they didn't let Tim in there, and we've talked about him a little bit throughout this interview. But I'm curious what you reflect upon when you think of the journey you have been on with Tim from the beginning up until this point where you are challenging for the world title.
Yeah, there's few people in this world that can change your life, and you wouldn't be in certain places without meeting them. If I never met Tim, we didn't grow up together. We're from Montana. He's from Great Falls. I'm from Helena. I never met him until after he was on Bellator TV show, which I thought was crazy. I'm sitting in my basement watching MTV Bellator Fight Master, Tim Welch from Great Falls. And I remember that was like inspiring. I was like, if I saw you on TV, I was like, they're famous. Like, he made it. So randomly, he was there at a fight in Great Falls, his hometown, commentating. And after the fight, I armbarred, knew very little jiu-jitsu at the time. I knew an armbar off my back. And I was fighting this college wrestler, a very good wrestler, Tim knew. Tim didn't know me yet, but he knew this wrestler, and he's like, oh, this, and Tim had heard of me because I was kind of making noise in that scene. Tim's like, oh, this guy's gonna probably smoke Sean. The dude takes me down, I break his elbow or pop his elbow, I armbar him. He tapped, and Tim was like, what the hell? This kid, like, that was insane. So after the fight, he invited me, said, hey, if you want to take this seriously, you're more than welcome to come and train in Phoenix. I was like, hell yeah. I called him the next day. He's like, whoa, chill. Like, I'm not even home yet. But so yeah, he gave me that opportunity to come to train in Phoenix. And it completely changed my life. So just that alone changed my life. I was like, I'm gonna go to California and train. Because for whatever reason, I thought that would be a good idea. But I had no actual plan. So that gave me a direction. I'm gonna move to Phoenix. I'm gonna live this lifestyle. Tim's trying to get into the UFC. So I'm gonna surround myself with those people. And yeah, we moved into an apartment together shortly after. And he kind of, once he would still fight, but every time I had a fight coming around, he would start to coach. He would start to hold pads. He would start to, kind of switch into this coach role, which he's always been good at. But it's pretty crazy looking back now to where he is. He owns his own gym, and he's my full-time coach. It's really cool. But yeah, without Tim, if I never met Tim, I'd like to think I could have still potentially made it some way, somehow, but I don't know if that's necessarily true.
What will it mean for you to be able to hand him the belt after you win it?
Yeah, it would be cool. Tim would be like, yeah, it'll be cool. I don't really care. I think he thinks, he's not, it'll be cool, but it's back to real life, back to normal life. The next week after fighting, like, he's gonna go back, coach his students at his gym, and we're back to regular life. I think we're both pretty good at coming back to regular life. Hopefully, I go out there and knock Aljo out. You might see Conor McGregor 2.0. I might be running around punching people. No, I'm kidding. But yeah, Tim. It'll be cool. It'll be really cool. Him holding the belt, us in the octagon together, flying home on a jet, sipping some Happy Dads. It'll be a great time. But back to work. I do feel like I'm just getting started, so we still have a lot of work to do.
Maybe people watching this don't equate Sean O'Malley with a normal life. Is that ever difficult?
I feel like, well, I've been living this lifestyle, this train twice a day ever since I moved to Phoenix when I was 18, 19 years old. I'm 28 now, so my life is very normal in a sense that it's normal to me. I go train in the morning, go home, recover, take a nap, eat, go back and train again in the afternoon. So that's very normal to me. I still go do my own shopping, go grab my groceries. Life seems pretty normal still at this point. But will it in 3, 4, 5 years? It might get a little crazy, and I've been preparing for that, and it'll be normal at that time too.
How do you also deal with the haters that come with such a high level of fame?
Do I have any?
I don't know. You tell me.
I don't think I have. I think every single person watching this loves me.
Perfect.
I don't know. I've never met a hater. I didn't know they existed. They might not.
I just thought maybe on the internet you saw one or two.
Of course. I feel like I've dealt with it in a slow, gradual build. I've been saying this for a long time when I was 2-0 in the UFC, and people hated it. I'm the next Conor. I'm gonna be massive. I'm gonna fight for the belt. And I got a lot of hate. People love to hate confident people. You see people that are confident, like, hey, I'm gonna do this, and they're like, haha, yeah, right. They like to laugh at you. All those people are miserable people. None of those people are doing sweet in their own life. So they're gonna hate on someone that actually is confident and wants to do sweet. So I've been dealing with it since I got in the UFC, since I've been on the Contender Series, saying that I'm going to be the next Conor, that I'm going to be a massive superstar, that I'm going to be a pay-per-view king. I've been dealing with it since I got in the UFC. It doesn't bother me at all. I'm rich, and that helps not let it bother you. It's like I'm chilling. So how is it? I don't. It's a weakness. If it bothered me, it'd be a weakness on my part, and there'd be something I have to deal with. But it doesn't bother me at all anymore.
You also have a beautiful family at home, your wife and your daughter. They were just here a couple of minutes ago. For you, how much does that also help when you have tough days at the office or things are going crazy in the MMA space or the fight world?
Yeah, that is huge. Like being able to, having a great day, coming home to Elena, having a bad day, coming home to Elena, like, Daddy, you come home to see me? Like, oh my God, it is. I look forward to it so much every time I'm driving home, knowing they're at home. If I'm getting home and they're already home. Like, I get so excited to go see Elena and Danny. It's weird when it's your princess. It's like falling in love for the first time every time. And they're growing, so she's 2.5. So each week she's almost like different. She's getting taller and she's saying more words. So it's like a different person. It makes this sport, which is very, very difficult. You know, you got training, you're sore, you got to get up and do it again. It makes it a lot better. But yeah, without again another person who I can completely say, like Tim, I wouldn't be in the position I'm in right now. Is Danny? I met Danny shortly after I got to Arizona, and you know, chasing chicks is a real thing, and I'm very lucky to have Danny to where I'm not out every weekend like chasing that thrill of chasing chicks. Every guy will, you know, whether they believe it or whether they want to admit it or not, that's a very dangerous game. So yeah, having Danny and Elena, it grounds me, keeps me very disciplined and on the right track.
Will you have Elena go to the fight?
It'll be, I mean, it's going to be East Coast. It will be very, very late there. She will be passed out with her grandma, will be in Boston. So they'll be at the hotel or Airbnb, wherever they choose to stay, asleep. But they will be in Boston.
What do your siblings think about your career, especially considering what you said at such a young age about the sport and just the popularity that you have as well?
Yeah, it's funny. My older brother, you know, he always apologizes because I would tell him like, I'm gonna be famous, I'm gonna be rich, I'm gonna be in the UFC, and he would always he would like degrade it or make me he would want to make me feel a certain way that wasn't very possible. And he always apologized, like, I'm so glad you didn't listen to me, I'm so sorry. I'm like, it's okay, like I had a certain self-belief there. It didn't matter who told me that. So yeah, it's pretty weird to those guys that. And then my little brother, I would always tell him the same thing, and he was always kind of like, "Shut up! Like, what do you?" I thought it was gonna be in the NFL for a while, and then I realized that ain't happening. So yeah, I would always tell these guys, hey, I'm gonna. Then once I started fighting, I would always tell them I'm in the UFC. I don't really know what they. I mean, it would be interesting to get their opinion of it. Like, what do you guys think about that? They were probably either annoyed that I would always say it, because I would bring it up a lot. I remember telling Daniel, like, I'm going to be richer than you someday. He's like, dude, I'm going to be a doctor or a lawyer or something, because he's very smart, very good at school. And it's funny to look at that now. But we have such a good relationship. I moved all of them down to Phoenix. They all live very close to me. Yeah, so it's really cool to be able to experience this with them.
Do they have as colorful personalities as you?
My little brother's completely opposite of me. Very, very chill. Like, I'm like, dude, you gotta get your testosterone levels checked. You're too chill. Like, this dude's like chilling. And then my sister's very entrepreneur-like. She loves to make money, as do I. She got her realtor license very fast. I bought 3 houses from her within a year. My mom just recently bought a house from her, so she's chilling. She's making some good money. She does a lot of odd jobs too. She's pretty similar to me in that sense. She'll work, she'll hustle, she'll make money. And then my older brother battled addiction for like 10 plus years, alcohol, meth, very dark places, been to jail a bunch, DUIs, very, very rock bottom. And then he dug a little bit deeper a few times. For him to be out here sober with his son, and you know, I know I gave him that opportunity because a lot of addiction, it's a big part of that is changing your environment. And in Montana, it's, you know, it's a hellhole. It can suck you in. So to give him the opportunity to be able to come out here and work is it's been awesome.
Just to have the support of a sibling during such a difficult time. I mean, the journey of sobriety isn't easy. So to have the support of his family is a beautiful thing.
Yeah, absolutely. And we weren't really all that close. Like, they were all living in Montana. I was the only one in Arizona for like 7, 8 years. So they were all doing their own thing. And then, you know, I got to a point, you know, to where I was able to help them. You know, my mom and brother are living in one of my houses. My sister's buying houses, so she's, you know, making money. My little brother's doing his own thing. He's going back to school. And so, yeah, it's cool that we're all this close now, because I don't think if I was in the UFC and I fought and I was doing what I'm doing, I don't know if we would all be as close as we are. You've
done so much for them. If and when you become the champion, what will be your first purchase for you?
Well, I just bought a farm a couple weeks ago, so it's like I just kind of just got paid a lot of money for that. That was a big purchase. I don't know. It's It depends. Win, I'll buy a Ferrari. Lose, I'll probably buy a Ferrari. No, I don't know. I haven't really thought about it too much. I do start liking, I find myself liking wanting to buy more materialistic stuff when I get into fight mode. When I do start to feel like Sugar, I start to kind of evolve into this character, into this person, into this persona of I'm like Sugar. That's kind of where I want to start buying, a Ferrari or some more sexy things, or maybe rent some stuff like Aljo did. Aljo got straight up caught when he said Dana bought him that Lambo, and then the person that he rented it from posted a picture and said "Champs rent for champs." That was embarrassing. But yeah, we'll see. We'll see we'll see how I'm feeling. I do think buying houses and real estate is a very obvious good investment. I've been very good with my money since day one. I've never really struggled with that, and I give that credit to my mom because she's very, very good with her money, and to almost an extreme, very stingy with her money. But I've learned a lot from her, and I was able to always, since day one, take care of my money and do a good job with that. So as far as what I'll buy, we'll have to wait and find out.
What made you want to buy a farm?
Well, I had gotten 6 chickens, and I have a nice property right now. It's like 1.4 acres. So but it's not farmland at all. It's like a resort kind of land. It's not like a farm at all. And funny enough, Tim and I were in New Jersey when Henry and Aljo were fighting. It was Friday night. He's like, dude, look at this house, because he was on Zillow, because he was looking for a house, and it was a beautiful house, had a perfect amount of acres, huge, massive trees in a city that's kind of not far, but it's close still to everything. And it was like, okay, people already kind of found out where I lived right now. It's not as safe. It's not, Danny doesn't necessarily love being there when I leave. But this house, it'll be a nice, fresh start. And it's out of the way for a little bit. And there's something about having the chickens that I find peace in, raising them. They haven't started giving eggs yet, but just they're constantly eating just the best food, organic food. And I juice these veggies and get the fiber from it, the veggies, and I feed it to them. And it's fun. I enjoy it. I was the farthest thing away from a farmer growing up, even being from Montana. I was like, ew, cow shit, gross. Now I got a cow, 15 chickens, and I would like to get some ducks and some goats. But I'm very sporadic or spontaneous. Who knows? I could be like, I say, for me in 3 years and end up moving. But I don't know. I've been finding a lot of peace in it, and I've been enjoying that farm life so far.
Multifaceted.
Multi-millionaire.
There you go. Before I let you go, you talked about this persona starting to feel more like Sugar. What does that look like for you on fight week? Is there a total evolution in the mind? Is it something you consciously go out and choose? Is it something that subconsciously takes over?
Ideally, subconsciously can take over, but I think some fighters deal with letting go and letting their higher self take over, more specific to a fight night. They kind of battle with wanting to flow, get into that zone. I do feel like that's where I'm one of the best in the world at surrendering to my higher self and letting that ability to take over. And the work has been put in. Now it's time to go out there and shine and do what I need to do. So, but as far as fight week, I do think it's a transition from camp to fight week to fight night, where I slowly start transitioning into that just that higher human.
And you thrive under the bright lights. So August 19th, UFC 292 in Boston. What happens in our main event?
How does that fight play out? I guess we'll have to wait, tune in, and find out. But I do believe at the end of the day, the Sugar Show and New defeats Aljamain Sterling one way or the other, and the Sugar era starts.
O'Malley in Boston, that's going to be a big one. Good luck to you. We will see you there. Thank you so much for your time, Sean.
Yes, thank you.
Appreciate it.